Welcome to the Wandering Pilgrims podcast. Thanks for joining us today. So, for our third episode, which still seems kind of weird, we thought we were going to do something a little different. So, this episode and probably a couple more that come after this are actually going to be digging into a book that is is considered the second most influential Christian book aside from the Bible, and that is Pilgrim's Progress.
Yep.
So this will be a little different. We're going to dig into it and the material kind of like we do a Bible study. We encourage everybody to go read it on their own or listen to it. They have some great audiobooks for this. I'll be sure to put links in the description. There are some that are Old English. If you like King James Version, like I like King James Version of the Bible a lot of the times, so the Old English might appeal to you more, but there's also modern versions, and there's family and even kid versions. So, and it's such an important story that, like, we got the family edition that I'm reading to our little one right now, actually. And we just wanted to share this with everybody because it's never been out of print since it was published.
The 1600s.
Yeah, the 1600s. But the other thing is that up until about, I'd say around 50 to 75 years, I could be wrong about that, but it's only been rather recent that this wasn't a book that everyone read.
Yeah.
It was considered a classic, and it was in schools, it was everywhere. But as the world has changed, and they don't include these kinds of things.
Yep.
So, but it was an extremely popular book. It's very easy to understand because it's an allegory. So basically every single person's name
It's a character trait.
Yeah, it's a character trait. It describes them perfectly. So you'll see that as we get into this a little further. But so a little more background about Pilgrim's Progress. I guess we talk about who wrote it.
Yeah, so it was written by a man named John Bunyan, who was an unauthorized pastor.
Yeah.
He was, as a kid, he was a troublemaker, and he was a troublemaker as a young adult. And then he meets an evangelist who tells him about God and all of these things, and he begins to read the Bible. And he starts to struggle with his burden, his sins, as he realizes them. So he goes on to get married and have children of his own, and he becomes a pastor that preaches in homes, in barns, in even the woods, wherever they can meet. He pastors to the people in his village. And this is right about the time when Great Britain was, I think, it's not long after the British Civil War.
Around the 1660s.
Yeah.
I want to say around 1668. I'll have to check. I'm not absolutely certain about that. But definitely the mid to late 1600s,
we know that he
I
fought.
believe.
He fought.
Yes,
in the British
he fought.
Civil War.
Yes. But as far as his preaching goes,
Yeah,
I
that's
think
after.
it was the 1660s.
Yeah.
Because I remember I seem to be, I don't know, I kind of think that the London fire in 1666 had happened before he went to prison for preaching.
Yeah.
But I want to say that happened to him around 1668, but I'm not absolutely certain. That's just me pulling from off the top of my head. We'll have to go back and check on that. But definitely mid to late 1600s is when he is preaching and teaching.
So he's preaching in public, which is against the law, and the authorities find out about it.
Illegal assembly, I think, is part of it.
Unlawful assembly.
Yeah.
And they send some men to arrest him. Someone warns him that if he preaches today, that he's going to be arrested. So he does it anyway. Because it's his feeling, it's belief that as Christians, that's what we're called to do, is to spread the word. So that's what he does. And he's arrested and spends the next 11 years? 11 or 12 years in prison. And while he's in prison, he writes this book called Pilgrim's Progress. And it wasn't published until after he was released.
Because there's something about, he went to the publisher and said something about, this is a book of like little importance or something like that, and it went on to be the second best-selling book for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But
and they let him out during the plague.
Yeah, they let him out during the plague on parole as long as he said he would come back, and he did. He went back.
He went back, and then
they'd let him out on Sundays too to preach.
Yeah, they'd let him out on Sundays to preach because his sentence wasn't overturned yet, and he did that until his sentence was finally overturned and he was released. But so he publishes this book. It becomes the best-selling English book of all time, and there's so many different. I think there's over 200 translations of the book. There's so many different types of, like,
modernized
version, modern
kids
English versions, kids versions, stuff like that.
Well, and I think that's something that we need to lay out here, because our name, part of the name of the podcast, actually comes from how important this book has been for us, and the wandering part actually comes from Tolkien. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many people know Tolkien was. He had a very strong Christian background. It was a Catholic background, if I remember correctly. And then C.S. Lewis, of course, was a huge influence. Him and Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were friends. Mm-hmm. But there was a quote Tolkien had in, I believe, I can't remember where it's from. That's sad. But it was, not all those who wander are lost. Mm-hmm. So, hence, wandering pilgrims. Is kind of where it came from, the inspiration for the name. But above all, studying your Bible on your own time with God, no additional interpretation, no. Yeah. I mean, I've never been able to get into devotions because I've went and I've picked them up and I've tried. Mm-hmm. But sometimes I'll pick up a devotion and it just has the reference that I'm supposed to read at the very top. Yeah. And there's nothing in it on the whole page that really discusses it. Yeah. So I can't, to me that's kind of more testimony, and I don't know, it just kind of depends on who's writing the devotional. But they've never really helped me personally get closer to God. I've always been more of a read it and he will speak through it without any middleman, so to speak. I mean, I know some people use them and it helps them a lot depending on what they're going through, but I think sometimes I'm a little wary of them at points, because I don't trust the world very much. I'm hesitant with certain devotionals and stuff, because I don't want anything to be taken away, and those especially where it's just the reference make me nervous because it's not there in red and black for me to read. Yeah. I'm reading someone else's words about what they think this means and how that can be applied to my life. Mm-hmm. But I may have gotten something totally different out of it if I had read just the passage. So I know that's a little off topic, but I'll circle back. I say, for me, reading the Bible is the most important book you will ever read, as unaltered as you can get it for yourself. That being said, there are a lot of Christian books that I think are very, very helpful to you on your journey, especially if you're new to the faith, and this would be one of them.
Oh, for sure.
If you're a Christian, you need to read Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah. And a lot of the books that I would consider very beneficial for spiritual growth aren't really books that a lot of people read anymore. Yeah. They've kind of gotten pushed aside for, I don't know, for other newer, more contemporary style books. And I mean, there's a lot of books. We'll probably do a couple of different books over the podcast of things and dig into them. But please read it for yourself. Check out the links we put. Hopefully you will enjoy it as much as we do. Mm-hmm. So, if you're good,
let's get into it.
I guess we'll just go ahead and get into it then. So,
the City of Destruction.
The City of Destruction. That is the name of the place that, depending on the version, your main character in this is Christian,
Graceless.
Or Graceless. There are a couple versions that his name is Graceless until he gets to a certain point in his journey to where his name is changed. I mean, I would like to find an old version to see if that's accurate, because they've got to have pulled that from somewhere. Yeah. But I always kind of liked the name change part because it reminds me of like Paul, Saul turning to Paul, and all the different name changes, Abram to Abraham, and the significance of that.
Well, this goes with the idea that you're at a certain point in your journey, you become a different person.
You change.
You're a different person than the person you used to be.
Yeah.
That person is gone.
Yeah.
And you're made new.
Yeah, made new. That's true.
So the City of Destruction is this place where the book starts out. And this is where Graceless lives and works. And this is a place where...
/ Christian.
Yeah. Graceless / Christian. This is a place where he works and lives. And all anyone really does in this city is work.
Yeah, you exist.
You exist. You get up, you go to work, you go home, you go to sleep. You get up. It's the same thing every day. And you could compare the City of Destruction to the biblical references of Babylon and all kinds of different places. But it's a very unhappy place. And then Graceless finds this book. He comes by this book. I don't quite remember how he comes by the book.
I don't remember.
Off the top of my head.
I don't remember how he gets a hold of it. I just always remember him reading it in the field.
Yeah, as far as I know, it's only ever referenced as the book.
Yeah.
So he comes by the book, and he begins to read it. And as he reads it, this takes place over several days, and as he reads it, he begins to develop this burden on his back, this weight that he has to carry around, and it's very uncomfortable.
And most people can't see it.
Yeah, and most everyone around him can't see it. He can see it.
Mm-hmm.
But the further he gets into the book, the more he reads into the book, the bigger the burden gets, and the heavier it gets. And then he starts to his family starts to get concerned, because he's depressed, and he's crying out, at random times.
Well, he kind of seems to go through stages, because for a while he was withdrawn.
Yeah.
He didn't want to talk to his family about it, and
No,
then eventually he just broke and he couldn't help it, and then he at first they tried to help him. They're like, you just need sleep, you just rest, you're just exhausted. Well, if you lived in a day-to-day like that, then
you'd be exhausted.
But he couldn't sleep. It was just awful. And then eventually they got tired of hearing of it, and they're like, you're just going crazy.
Yeah.
You're crazy.
You're a crazy person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or angry.
Yeah.
Because he wouldn't stop talking about it. So that's what got him to walking and going out into the field.
Yeah, so
and
he
stuff,
tries
right?
to convince his family that what he's reading in the book is true. He believes it to be true. And that the city is going to be destroyed, and they have to go to this place called the Celestial City to be safe. And he tries to convince his family of this, his wife and his sons, and they're not having any part of it. They all but write him off as crazy pants. So he begins just walking on his own. And as he's walking,
Didn't he cry out in the field?
Yeah, he falls to his knees and he cries out, What shall I do? What shall I do? And in that moment, a man appears. Comes out of nowhere. And the man's name is Evangelist. And Evangelist tells him that if you want to get rid of your burden,
which he can see,
you have to go to the Celestial City by way of a gate. And he shows him the path, and he says, stay on this path, and it will take you to the wicket gate, which means small, narrow, straight and narrow. Yeah. It's a straight path that leads to a narrow gate.
It's always straight. The gate or the path is always straight and hard at points.
Yeah, very hard. So he just starts running. He's running towards the path. And his family, they start to cry out to him to come back. So he sticks his fingers in his ears.
And keeps running.
And he keeps running.
But I'd like to pause for a second.
Yeah.
And think about that.
Yeah.
Because essentially this entire story is a person finding their beliefs and their faith, finding Christ to the end game and end goal, being celestial city, salvation, heaven.
Yeah.
Salvation and heaven. And the first obstacle that he writes in this book is family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the very first one.
I don't know that I've ever heard anyone or read anywhere else where that is a topic that has ever been discussed.
Yeah.
Because he tried to get them to come, and he wanted them to come, and you'll hear him talk in the book about he's trying to pave a way, hopefully, for them to come.
Yeah.
But
he really tries to.
He really tries to. But he couldn't. No. He couldn't budge them. He couldn't pull them. Mm-hmm. So all he could try to do was lead by example.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that just kind of struck me because it started out with family. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's just not common.
It's not something that's talked about.
It's not something that's talked about.
Well, it's one thing dealing with, as a Christian, it's one thing to understand how to deal with non-believers.
Yeah.
On a day-to-day basis or however often, in conversation and things like that. It's different when they're family members.
Yeah.
That's...
You could even apply that to people who aren't at the same point, who are in family or in friends group, because he goes on in friends or next what we talk about. But what if they're at a different point in their faith?
Yeah.
Or they profess to believe, but may have fallen off the wagon in other parts of their life or something. So it's such a key concept that's not really, it's not talked about. It's not, and we're not taught how to really handle it.
Yeah.
Or at least I wasn't. I don't know about everybody else, but I wasn't really taught how to handle. You're kind of told, go witness, go out into the world, speak about your faith and tell everybody and everything else, but they don't really talk about how to go about that. Doing it to a stranger, to me, would be easier than somebody well.
Yeah.
So, and convincing them. But those are the people that you love the most. You would want to have the same end goal.
They're also the people that you don't want to hurt their feelings.
Yeah, that's true.
So telling them that how they're living their life is not the right way to live their life, and that it's detrimental to them.
That can be hard. It's
hard truth.
That's why we strive so much to have accountability with each other and in our group, because it's really hard to stay on the straight and narrow. And side note, please take these as cliff notes.
Go read it.
Please go read it. Listen to it. Share it. Help people to read it again if they haven't read it in a long time, or read it for the first time, because, we could never give you an ounce of what that story...
what you'll get out of it.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about places and characters and stuff. We're not going to talk about any of the dialogue or any, well, maybe some that takes place, but we're really try not to just tell you the story, but kind of talk about places and people and how that at least in our mind relates to other things.
Well, and maybe hopefully this will pique your interest.
Yeah.
And you'll go and read it and check it out, or listen to it, however you like to get your stories. And then maybe you can use this as a resource after you've listened to it or read it. That way you can go back and say, oh, okay, I see that, I saw that, and that really struck me too, or something like that. I hope that this is a resource for people for before and after, the same way that I would hope so with biblical reading.
Yeah.
Because that's why we don't go over the exact verse when we get something out of it. We're hoping you'll go and read it and get something out of it for yourself. That's specifically for you.
The other thing is, this is a book that you can read several times.
Oh, yeah, you know that.
Yeah. So back to him running.
I do love the fingers in the ears part, though.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. Funny mental picture there.
So he's running, and he reaches the path. And as he reaches the path, two of his friends from the city of destruction catch up with him, because they've been chasing him this whole time and yelling at him.
Yeah.
And he's had his fingers in his ears, so he didn't hear them.
He had no idea.
And one of them is named Obstinate, and one of them is named Pliable. So one is stubborn, and never changes his mind, ever. Even when faced with absolute fact, won't change their mind. The other one is wishy-washy.
Constantly changing their mind.
Constantly.
Whatever's easier, whatever's best at the time, whatever sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like how this book is laid out because it makes things so plain.
Mm-hmm.
And because they're labeled as a character trait, and then you see how the character trait, that specific character trait plays out, it's much easier to recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't think I would constantly think of something as obstinate.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a word that I think of very often.
Well, obstinate is holds a lot of weight.
It does.
At least with me, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
Like, looking at all the different stuff that you hear about, and a majority of it, a good part of it, is because of people being obstinate.
Unwilling to
see someone else's point of view.
Or sit down and look at the facts.
Yeah.
Or read it.
Yeah.
Or, okay, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. There's definitely not as much pliability.
Yeah.
I'll say there's not as many pliable personalities. At least not in the news.
Yeah. Yeah, and what the point to me is don't be obstinate, obviously.
But don't be pliable.
But then also don't be pliable.
I think that might be why they were paired.
Yeah. So
two sides of the same coin.
I mean, you want to hold steadfast to your beliefs, to facts and things like that. But be open to the argument.
Yeah, because if you shut somebody down from the beginning, especially if you're trying to convince them and help them grow in their faith or help them even come to their faith, if you're it's one thing to be sure of your faith. If you're sure of your faith, you're confident in your faith, you're comfortable in your faith. Obstinance comes with a bit of anger and a bit of defensiveness.
Yeah.
Or at least that's how I think of obstinance. And so if somebody says something about why do you do this or why is this way, if you meet them with aggression and obstinate, you know, all they see is, well, they're set in their ways and they're not even going to talk to me about it.
Yeah.
So
if you
have to be careful.
Yeah, at least for me, like, you shouldn't be that way in the first place.
No. I think some of it comes from maybe a bit of uncertainty or being uncomfortable in your faith or not as learned.
Yeah, maybe not even that. Maybe, like you said, just being confident enough in yourself to talk about it.
And your faith and your knowledge of your faith. That's why, back to the verse that started all this, always be able and ready to explain the hope that you have.
Yeah.
Because it can make people defensive and dig in their heels when somebody asks you or even confronts you about a particular part of your faith.
Yeah.
That the only thing you have to back up your knowledge is maybe what you've heard one off, maybe a pastor or a friend or somebody say, and you don't really have the knowledge or scriptural information to back up your viewpoint. So you feel backed into a corner. You feel weaponless, and a lot of times it just makes you...
Well, apologetics isn't something that's really
helpful
taught on
No,
anymore.
but it's helpful.
Oh, for sure.
Finding people for apologetics is fantastic.
It's something that should be taught to everyone.
My favorite is Ravi Zacharias.
Yeah.
He's probably one of my favorite people to listen to help me learn where I stand and why I stand this way and where this comes from and everything. Because if you don't have that information,
if you don't know what I'm sure a lot of people do. If you don't know what apologetics is, it's not apologizing for things that have been done. Apologetics is basically it's being able to back up your faith,
explain and argue your
explain and argue your points.
More in a debate
style fashion, yeah.
And if you think about people that do debating, most people, if they know their material and their side, they don't lash out. They don't seem like they're backed into a corner. They're not defensive with their information because they're confident in their information. They've learned it. They're knowledgeable. So they don't have that obstinate kind of persona at that time with that information. Yeah. So, but being too pliable can be
I'm
just
trying to
as
think
bad.
Offhand of someone I've known in my life that was pliable.
I've known a few.
I can't remember any off the top of my head, but
the few that I knew were, and I mean, obviously I'm a girl, but the few that I knew were girls, and it had more to do with school and wanting to be popular or wanting to be with the
in crowd.
Yeah, different people at different schools, because I met a lot of people growing up that went to different schools and stuff, and there were always a few that they really wanted to not to feel included, so they could change, easily be swayed. Their minds could be changed on something so that they felt included, but I can't say that I know a ton.
Well, now that I think about it, that is a huge issue.
What?
Coming out of schools is people being pliable.
Okay.
Like, what is, like, even in movies, like from when we were kids, like there's always the groups.
Cliques.
Every high school movie.
Well, there's cliques in everything.
Cliques.
There's cliques in workplaces. There's cliques in any organization nowadays.
Yeah.
So it's hard to kind of root them out. We naturally kind of group.
And there's those older movies. Thank you. They always have to do with the main character
who has a dominant, maybe an obstinate even persona.
Yeah.
Definitely domineering.
Like
kinda.
Being a little bit pliable to get into this group and then realizing that that's not who they are, that's not how they want to be, and then, going back to being themselves or whatever. That's the trope or whatever it's called.
I'm thinking Mean Girls.
Yeah.
Like, that's...
Yeah.
She was new. She, she was confident in herself until she kind of was made to feel not confident in herself.
Yeah.
And then she ended up taking on the persona of the person in charge. Mm-hmm. So much so that she took out the person in charge.
Yeah.
Until they eventually realized they were better off apart and getting to be who they were on their own with their own personalities. So, pliability.
It's a big problem with the young people.
Being easily swayed is I don't know which one would be worse. I kind of think obstinance would be worse, but I don't know. It seems like we have more of a problem with being pliable at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're young. Yeah, well, you're trying to figure everything out. And
trying to see where you fit.
But there is a lot, I don't know if it comes from social media or what, with digging in your heels. Like, once you've decided this is what I believe, either because it's popular or because that's just where you've landed at the moment. Yeah. And it's like it shuts down. A lot of the time it shuts down because we aren't supposed to make anybody feel bad anymore. So the discussion breaks down to the point where people seem to feel attacked if they hear a different viewpoint. Yeah. And there comes obstinance. Yeah. After the pliability, once they think they've settled on something, that they don't want to possibly change their mind. So that's a very scary thing for especially the newer generation. I see it, the younger generation.
Yeah.
I see it more coming out of schools now, and it's scary. And I know that it's not everybody, and I'm thankful that it's not everybody coming out of schools, but they definitely do a good job of making it seem that way sometimes. And I know they'll come to understand and be more open as they get older. I know that comes with age too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to be confronted with the hard world before you're willing to open your mind back up.
Yeah. Like a slough.
Or swamp. I prefer swamp.
Slough of despond.
Yes, and for other people that don't want to have to go look up any of these, slough equals swamp, despond equals depression.
Yeah.
Because I already went and looked them up. Because when I'm trying to make notes for this, I'm like, how do I spell slough? Because I have an idea and I think I'm wrong.
So I thought it was reading it like it's explained in the book. But the Slough of Despond it's a swamp, a mud hole.
Before we get to that, Obstinate and Pliable caught up with Christian.
Yeah.
And were trying to convince him to go back.
Mm-hmm.
Christian was saying why he didn't want to and what all he had learned. Obstinate, of course, dug in his heels and said, "You're crazy, I'm going back." But Pliable, being pliable, likes the sound of cities paved with gold and, no more sorrow and things like that. So he decides to go with him. So he is with Christian at this point when they get to the Slough of Despond.
Yeah.
So.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay.
So they get the Slough of Despond. It's a big swamp, and it's explained to the characters in the story that the king has tried for hundreds of years,
forever, pretty much,
to fill it up, to drain it. He has these engineers and these builders. They come and they build steps so that it's easier for people to get across it. And they've drained it and they've filled it in, and they've drained it and they've filled it in.
Never matters. It always comes back.
It always comes back. And it's because it's not mud. It's what the slough is it's all the doubt, fear, regret of
self-loathing.
Yeah, of
anything negative like that.
Of the people who've been in the slough or been through it. Yeah.
Well, they fall into it basically.
Yeah.
And this is icky, sticky, nasty
stuff.
And Christian, being weighted down by a burden and all, trying to not drown. Pliable, on the other hand, gets mad. Yeah. He's like, it's too hard.
Yeah, this is too hard.
And he goes back. So there's the wishy-washy. But Christian, I'm going with Christian just for continuity because it's easier.
Okay. He's still graceless at this point.
Yes. He doesn't become Christian until the gate.
Later on,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the gate.
Yeah.
I think it's... Yes, he became Christian after seeking and knocking.
Yeah.
Was my notes on it. But for continuity's sake, Christian. Yeah. He's drowning, basically. He's trying to not die.
And he
cries out for help.
Help!
Which, guess what shows up?
Help.
A man named Help. With... And he shows up, he pulls him out on the other side, and he's like, "Why didn't you take the steps?"
Yeah.
It's like, what steps?
He's like, "Oh, darn, they're covered up again."
They're covered up again. But there was one thing about this when realizing what all it was made of, and basically that this was just a swamp of depression. A literal depression in the earth. Mm-hmm. Full of bad self-loathing kind of thoughts, essentially. negative thoughts for a person. And they've always tried to fill it in. They've tried to drain it. They've tried to get rid of all these feelings. They've tried to fill that. If we look at it as a person with depression, they tried to fill them up. They tried to take it out. They tried to do all of this, right? And talking about this and reading it, I kind of got to the point where I'm like, well, you know, anybody who's going through that, you can't fill them up and make it go away. They have to be pulled out, and they have to help pull themselves out. You can't just, I mean, you can be there for them, and that's very important, and try to help them get out of it. But a lot of the times it's a personal, you have to cry out for help. And I mean, I've been there, and there was no person on this planet who could help me. And literally cry out for help. I was given help. And it fixed everything. So I think that's important to think about, and because it's hard. Depression's hard, and so many people have it now. And I encourage anybody, if you do feel that way, talk to somebody. And if you don't feel like you can talk to somebody, you can at least talk to God in private, in a closet, so to speak, as He tells us to do. And read Psalms. And I challenge you, if you feel that way, start at the beginning. And even if you start feeling better, don't stop until you get to the end. Read it all. Because it will help. I think it, or at least for me, it helps.
I think so.
I think it's very helpful. So, he gets pulled out. Help sets him back on the road, and this is how you go, and helps him along. So he's back on his way.
Back on the narrow path. And as he's walking the path, he comes upon another man whose name is Worldly Wise Man. And Worldly Wise Man basically asks him where he's going. Christian tells him. And then he scoffs at him. And he says, you don't have to do all of that. You just go to this village.
Yes.
Called Morality. And talk to a man named Legality.
Or his son Civility.
Yep.
If you can't get legality.
And they'll get rid of your burden.
You made a good point about this when we were talking about it. That, what was it that you thought it was?
So many people deal with so many different things in their life. And rather than what we're supposed to do as Christians is hand it over to God. And look to God's wisdom through the Bible on how we're supposed to deal with these situations. So many people don't do that. Instead, they go to the government.
Yeah, civility and legality. Yeah. And it's in, the funny part to me is that if we look at legality and civility as more of a governing body, definitely not just the word. And you can't eliminate government. Government has a purpose. But I get what you mean.
Yeah.
They're looking for another answer. People look for another answer and another way out. But it's interesting to me that the things that you can relate to governing body is in a place called morality.
Yeah.
So what rules legality and civility? The quote-unquote morality of the world. Well, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
And something to definitely consider when I don't know, I try to consider biblical information when I hear about new laws and new things that are going to be voted on or that I have the opportunity to vote on, because
well, that's the thing, and that's why it's referenced in here as a bad thing, is that worldly wisdom changes all the time.
Oh, yeah.
To suit culture.
Yeah. whatever's going on in the world at that time. And I mean, you got to think,
It
this is a
always
man
changes.
writing this who at that time couldn't preach, couldn't teach, couldn't...
He couldn't stand up in front of a group of people.
He's okay if he did it in his
and
home with his
speak
family.
words. Yeah. Yeah.
But not an assembly.
Nope.
Not an assembly.
0 right to assembly.
So I think that is a very important part, and to always try to remember that the morality of the world will fluctuate.
Well, see, the other thing is we live in a place where it's illegal to steal things.
Yeah.
You can't go and take someone else's property without judicial ramifications.
Yes.
Right. That's not the case in other parts of the world. And for a very long time in human history, people did that. You have this thing. I need this thing to survive. I'm going to take it from you.
Yeah.
Our culture has gotten to a point to where that's frowned upon. That's a bad thing.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And as Christians, it's part of the covenant that you don't do that.
Yeah.
That's never changed.
No.
The covenant has never changed.
No.
It is always the same. It will always be the same. Laws can change
all the time,
all
depending
the time.
on the whim of the people and the mood of the people making the laws. So I think that's important to remember, because this is legality of the world and civility of the world being ruled, being in the morality of the secular world.
Yeah.
And he was sending him to the secular world
Yeah.
for reassurance and for help and for law and order, quote unquote, be ruled over by this sense of morality, this sense of legalism. If you have enough rules, it'll be okay, kind of thing. So, yeah, I thought that was very interesting. And then, but, I mean, he told him that it would be easier once he found them, of course.
Just to pause for a second, he also references the fact that he goes to church, a worldly wise man, but he only does it when he has a chance to wear his good slippers.
Yeah, he does say that.
He only goes when he can look his best and when he can presumably be prideful of it.
Yeah, be proud. The other thing that I would point out about that is he says that he goes to church in morality.
Yeah.
And that's scary. And that's a false prophet reference.
Well, how many people nowadays that are secular that don't have a religion or a faith or anything like that? All of that energy that would be used there is used on ideology.
Yeah.
I mean,
identity, or maybe politics,
the
or
firmness to which they cling.
There's a lot of fervor there.
To
the
that,
energy.
Yeah. To that it's a religion for a lot of people.
That's true. Yeah, I can see that. That's kind of terrifying too. I wouldn't want the government and not the government per se, but the politics to be my religion. Do you know how depressing that would be?
Yeah.
No. I mean, I think it's important to be informed.
Yeah.
Because your rights are only 1 or 2 generations away from being wiped out if you're not careful and vigilant.
Yeah.
But
somebody was talking about that today. We were talking about how, well, like that's what we used to. We used to fight over religious beliefs. We did it throughout human history. People fought over what this group believed versus what this group believed, and then at some point, at least in Western culture, we came to a point where we went, okay, enough is enough.
You have yours, I have mine. Leave me alone.
We're at a point where we can agree that doing this to each other over this doctrine or this doctrine is bad.
Yeah.
So let's argue about the semantics.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And how our faith translates into the world, that's politics.
Okay.
How the difference between faith, individual faith, and how a group faith governs a body of people.
Yeah, that technically
a
is.
large body of people.
Yeah, you could
That's
technically,
politics.
it is technically politics, church politics, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's been around for quite a long time.
Yeah. You're at a point where you've agreed upon
certain
the
things.
large umbrella under which you all stand.
And now you nitpick about details.
Now you're nitpicking about the details now.
When it would be better and you would serve the world better if you could all come together in your community and go, we're all Christians. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
We're all going to serve this person that this happened to in our community. We're all going to go and give time at this place or clean up this area of town or go build this person a new, I don't know, a new shed because it needs repairing, or we're going to all chip in and get them a new lawnmower because theirs broke down, or just simple acts. But, I mean, do you know how unimaginably powerful it would be if the Christian churches, all Christian churches, just got together in each community, each tiny little town, each county, and said, we don't care about denominations anymore. We're all going to help each other, and we're going to find people to serve, whether they're part of our congregation or not. So everybody in the congregation, pay attention to the news, and if you see somebody with a need, that's who we're going to go help. We're not there to toot our own horn. We're not there to wear T-shirts that say we're all from this church. Come sit in our pew. Yeah. We're here just to serve as Christ would serve. It sounds insane and it sounds simple at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's world-changing, life-changing for people.
Yeah.
Politics, regardless of where they are, can get in the way.
Yep.
Whether it's people arguing over politics in church, or it's churches and church politics arguing church politics. Yeah, they can get in the way.
Yeah.
I do think that...
And that's referenced a lot of times.
think that doctrine and certain stuff has a place.
Yeah.
To a point. Because you have to be able to lay out your beliefs so that people that are trying to understand, like, why are you this, or why is this... what do the Catholics believe? What do Lutherans believe? What do Methodists believe? Baptists, and so on. It's important to be able to understand the doctrine, but eventually, if you get too big, everybody doesn't fit in one, description.
Well, there's this other thing in the book that you kind of catch on to in the very beginning of the book, and then. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but it's really hinted at towards the middle of the book.
Okay.
Is this underlying nefarious kind of movement behind
something
what's
constantly
going on.
Working against him.
Yeah.
Starting with there are trials and then there are people.
Yeah.
So you have a little bit of each. So you have obstacles and then you have people that are there to turn you out of the way.
Yeah, these people always tend to show up
at the perfect
time. At convenient times.
Well, if I remember right, couldn't Worldly Wise Man see his burden?
Yeah.
When other people couldn't see his burden.
Yeah. Except
for evangelists who understood why he was burdened. I think Help could see it, but I don't remember a lot of reference there.
But it's in there, and you can as you're going along and reading, you can see it. But the reason I mention that is what better way to stop you in your path than if I can get you and another person and maybe several hundred other people to stop and be nitpicky.
Distracted.
To stop and argue politics, stop and argue semantics or doctrine, whether you need to be sprinkled or dunked, if I can get you standing there arguing about that for 20 minutes, what are you not doing?
Yeah. I mean, it's not exactly...
It's never, and in movies and in things like this, it's always this big action of the bad guy that takes place. In the real world, it's never that. They're always tiny little things. Tiny little things. Like you start out your day, and you're having a wonderful day. You get up, you get your coffee, you're having a wonderful day, and then someone cuts you off.
And it starts.
And then you hit 3 red lights in a row. Mm-hmm. And your day starts to take a turn. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's always tiny little things.
And ultimately, it's up to you to decide to stay on.
Yeah. Sometimes it's big things. I mean, sometimes it's big things.
Yeah, everybody has big things, but...
But for the most part, for everyone, across the board, it's tiny little things that get you distracted. And that occurs a lot in this book.
Very easily. Distracted.
I mean, he starts to head off towards morality, and he just went through the first obstacle,
and he's already off the path.
Mm-hmm.
Listening to someone else.
Yeah.
And I have to say that there are certain... I'm sure everybody will find their favorites in this story, if you can call them that. I don't know what other term to use. I wouldn't say that I like these people per se, but there are definitely some that I pick out as very important. And Worldly Wise Man is one of them for me.
Yeah. Well, how many people like that just on in television and on the internet are that person?
Well, the thing to me with Worldly Wise Man is that Worldly Wise Man is more for somebody who is a Christian or starting out as a Christian. He doesn't really appeal to me as somebody that's
learned in their faith.
No, he's more sent for people on the journey, not for people that aren't looking.
Yeah.
Worldly Wise Man's not there for people that aren't trying to be Christian, so to speak. And if you think about it, from at least my experience, a lot of Christians today, and I'm sure a lot of Christians throughout history, leave the path due to worldly wisdom and trying to be more like the world because it's easier. And not only that, but if you're not informed for yourself, I'm not saying somebody else's opinion or somebody else's, this is what I got out of it. For you, if you don't know it, for yourself, for what it says, it's very easy to be swayed, especially by false doctrine, because there's a little truth in there. Yeah. There's a little Bible in there. But depending on how they present it, well, that's an idea I'd never heard of, and I can see why they believe that. If you don't know the context for yourself, you're listening to somebody else's context. And if you're not well versed in your knowledge and in your faith and in your prayer life and being accountable and what we're trying to get back to, it's very, very hard to be able to pick these out. I know I've started down the path with people like that before. And it took me literally examining what they were talking about with context. Like, I literally went through everything that they talked about, and then I looked up, like, the opposite.
Yeah.
That's what I had to do to figure out, like, who's right. And I'm lucky enough to have the Bible that I can do that.
Yeah.
So now I have, to my best knowledge, the correct answer. From both, I've had both perspectives, but I don't know, it's important to be able to do that, and you have to know how to study it, and you have to know how it works for you to be able to figure all of that stuff out. So, with all of that being said, do you think we covered Worldly Wise Man, morality, legality, civility?
I think so, yeah.
So, okay. Christian has started on the path. He makes it to the mountain over near morality. And it kind of sounds like a volcano in a way, but there's fire coming out of it, not lava, fires coming out of the mountain. It sounds like a very angry mountain. So he's, and it kind of hangs over him.
Yeah.
And he's afraid of it. And it kind of makes him stop, kind of examine where he's at, and do I really want to go under that thing? Because it looks like it might fall on my head.
Yeah.
He's standing there, kind of like, what am I supposed to do now? I don't like that I'm here. Now what am I supposed to do? Guess who pops up again?
Evangelist.
Now, did he cry out for help? I can't remember if he did, or if Evangelist just, poof,
happened to be there.
But Evangelist did show up.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, what are you doing here?
Yeah. How quickly you stepped from the path.
Yeah. It didn't take you no time.
Keep in mind, this is a straight path.
Yeah.
It's a straight line of a path.
Yep.
So it's hard to lose.
Yeah. You don't need a map. Like, he made it simple.
Just walk in a straight line.
Not necessarily simple and hard at the same time.
Yeah, well, see, that's something that people seem to conflate nowadays, is this idea of simple and easy.
Yeah, just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
That's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Because as far as salvation, it's relatively simple. That doesn't mean that it's not hard. You recognize your salvation through Christ.
You're given an entire book.
Yeah,
you're
given
an entire
a how-to
book that tells you how to seek and how to ultimately get salvation. And yet it's so unbelievably difficult.
Well, the other thing is that once you reach salvation, that's not the end.
Yeah.
That's not where you're supposed to stop.
Yeah.
You're supposed to, he kind of spells it out for you. You're supposed to try to be Christ-like. And I think that's a term that's thrown around a lot, but not given a whole lot of substance as far as how you're supposed to go about that. I always heard that you need to be Christ-like, and then I was kind of always waiting for the explanation, like, what exactly are you meaning? I mean, I can go read it, and I should have gone and read it right then when I was questioning it, but I'm listening to somebody telling me to be Christ-like and not giving me an explanation. So what does that mean? And I guess the best way I've been able to explain it for myself is actionable love and service. Love through action and serving others with for no other reason than to do that, because that's how Christ was. And he served people by washing their feet. He loved people and served them by telling them hard truths.
Yeah.
He didn't shy away when people needed to hear something to try to help them get back on the straight and narrow. And Evangelist kind of does that here with Christian. Like, you know that I told you how to go.
Yeah.
It's like, I know, but worldly wise man said he could do this, and that morality could help me, or not morality, legality.
He kind of has like a little freak out.
He does, because he doesn't know what to do.
Yeah.
It's this person that set him on this path, that gave him the answer, has now all of a sudden showed up again. How am I going to explain that I'm where I'm at?
Yeah.
When he told me what to do, I didn't listen.
And this basically what he says. He admits that.
Eventually, he admits that he didn't listen.
That he didn't listen, and that he's done something very bad.
And he begs.
And he does. And Evangelist just forgives him.
Like, you're not the first person to...
you're fine, dude.
As long as you recognize it.
Yeah.
and ask to be forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
You are more than welcome to go back to the path and to continue your journey.
Yeah.
And he's almost jubilant with
Yeah,
excitement.
and for me at least, like, maybe I'm just remembering it wrong, but he doesn't walk back to the path.
He runs, doesn't he?
It's there.
I don't remember.
As far as I can remember,
There's a lot of path.
and I need to read it again for the whatever time. But in my head, I want to say that he points him to the path.
And it's right there.
It's right there. Like, he's walked all this way off the path initially.
And now the path's right
and
there.
now it's
for
right
him.
there. Yeah.
You may be right. I can't, like I say, there's a lot of path.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of venturing. And
But he points him towards the light that's coming through the gate.
yes.
And he says, "Do you see the wicket gate?" And he's like, "Yeah, I see it." So he just takes off running.
Yeah, he runs to
He
it
takes off
as
running
fast
towards
as he
this
can for this
Yeah.
gate.
And he gets to the gate and he knocks.
Yes, he
Um,
knocks.
I can't remember what the door says.
It's a reference to what Jesus says. Basically, if you knock, it will be open to you.
Yeah.
And ask to
Knock and the
enter.
door will be opened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Or
what he
stand
does.
at the door and knock.
And I want to say someone from inside
Goodwill.
said Goodwill
Yes.
is the man's name. He says, "What are you?" Something to the point of like, "What are you here for?" And he's like, "Let me in, let me in." So he goes, "Okay." So he opens the door and he jerks him inside.
Yeah, really quick.
Like really fast. And that's basically that's all he had to do.
Was
get to the
ask
gate.
for entry.
Was knock
Yeah.
and ask for entry.
But I mean, that was the basics anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But Goodwill, I can't remember. Goodwill seemed a little more gruff than some of the others.
Yeah. Well, he's like, he runs the gate.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But he makes it. He's made it to the gate. He's made it to the place that evangelist told him to get to. Yay, my burden comes off now,
Yep.
right? No. This is just the starting line.
Yeah. He's made it to the start line of
He's
his
made
journey.
it to the start. So
Yeah.
he had to go through all of this just to make it to the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
which was asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's asking a question. It's learning. It's trying to get to your salvation. Seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Actively.
Yeah. Tolkien makes a reference to this too on a door.
Yes. Speak, friend, and enter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knock and the door shall be open to you.
Yeah. Speak, friend, and
Speak,
enter.
friend, and enter.
Which is also funny, considering you have Gandalf there, who's this very smart wizard. You have an elf there that he's
A ranger.
knowledgeable and all these people sitting around trying to figure out what this means. And this little hobbit goes, it says, "Speak, friend, and enter." What's the word for friend? He says it, and there it goes.
opens.
It's simple,
Yeah.
simple, but they got caught up overthinking it,
Yep.
trying to make it harder than it was.
Which happens. That happens to. I feel like that happens to a lot of people.
Well, can you, if you take the story, well, it's not the story, but you get to a point where you understand that there is a God
Yeah.
who created everything,
Mm-hmm.
that men rebelled, they fell from grace, they lost it.
Yeah. Humans.
And yet he still wants us and cares for us.
Yeah.
So he found a way to save us from sin and to give us everlasting grace and life as he originally intended. And to do that, a part of God came down, lived a human life, humbled beyond humility, beyond anything necessary for an all-powerful being, to save us. Lived a human life, had all the same temptations, tempted in the desert, to prove that he is sinless and remained sinless in a sinful world.
Yeah.
Willingly suffered human death.
Yeah.
To conquer it.
Yep.
And to absolve the world of the sins that had come, that had been, that were present, and that came after. And then when you apply that in a personal way, he did all of that for you.
Yeah.
For me. It's unimaginable.
Yeah.
So
I think it gives...
to simply say all you have to do is recognize that you're saved and follow in the way that he teaches, that seems too simple almost for that great of a gift.
Yeah.
And I think we do overthink it and think that we have to be... He meets us where we are, and he knows how we are. He made us.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing about God, is that he just really likes sharing.
Yeah.
Like all the things that he created, including people, he shares rule with them. He shares authority with them.
He gave them the knowledge. He gave us the book full of knowledge to help us be more like him.
Yeah. And he shared, like, in it's reference to what you're saying, in Genesis 3, he's teaching humans, he's teaching Adam and Eve about the world and about the garden and the animal and all of these things. He walks with them every day. And then he tells them, like eat whatever you want in the garden. Except this tree.
Yeah. And then they're convinced otherwise.
Yeah, they're convinced otherwise, and they fall from grace. But when he tells them not to eat it, what does he tell them? Don't eat of the tree. And they ask, why? And he says, because you'll die. If you eat of this tree, you'll die. Well, they do it anyway. And what eventually happens to them?
They die.
They die. And what did Jesus defeat in his final battle?
Death. Yeah. So, but as far as overthinking and simple versus difficult, I think that's an easy thing to do when it comes to our faith, when you recognize how massive of a gift that is. How can it be so simple for me to find salvation, as to recognize that he did that for me, and to follow his laws and to live as he has asked me to live as best as I can. I mean, we're all going to falter, but to ask forgiveness when we do.
Yeah.
That's awful simple.
Yeah.
There's a lot of effort put in to save each individual person. And that's very simple.
Yeah, it's a very simple, and it's a very...
But it's amazing in its simplicity.
It's a very small repayment.
It is. But
in comparison,
how Jesus lived and served, his miracles were big.
Yeah.
But a lot of the things that he did were small to individuals. You have the stories of the lady touching the hem of his garment and she's healed. That was an individual thing. There was a lot of times when he'd heal people and tell them not to go tell anybody.
Yeah.
He wasn't seeking glory. It was just to show love through action and service and kindness.
Just to help people.
Just to help others. That's simple.
Yeah.
We make it so much harder because we think that we have to. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah.
Ultimately, that's what we're called to do.
Like if you see a homeless person on the corner at the red light, if you have a bottle of water, if you have a sandwich, if you have some cash or some spare change, give it to them. They need it more than you need it. If you have the spare change, they need it more than you need it. And it does not matter what they do with it.
It's your actions that matter.
Yeah, it's your action that matters.
You may be the only person that's kind to them the whole day.
Yep. That might be the only $1.82 they've received all day. And they go buy their food with it.
And we talk about a lot in church showing the love of Christ. Showing the love of... That's it. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not... A lot of people do get caught up in showing their love in other ways. Like, you get convinced that it has to be more than just that simple.
It has to be this big thing, and it doesn't have to be this big thing. It can be tiny little things that you do all day. You don't get in an argument with this person. You give this guy some spare change, or you shared your sandwich with this person at school. You
held the door open for the person struggling with the shopping cart, or... Just small acts of kindness.
Yeah.
Small acts of caring about each other. That's it. And bigger things when you can.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what a person looks like, or what a person believes, or how a person has talked about you, or any of that. They're all humans. Every person you come into contact with every single day is a human being.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that you need to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Is the fact that they are the image of God.
Just like you.
Just like you.
Yep. That's definitely something to try to keep in mind every single day. If you can focus your mind on being that way, like Christ, every single day, how life-changing will that be for the people around you and for yourself?
Yeah.
But it definitely helps you when you have books like Pilgrim's Progress to help you through, help you understand a little better, maybe story form, of course, but to help you get there. And then, of course, you spend time in your Bible understanding the history and all of the different things that led up to get Christ here. I mean, that's why the Old Testament fascinates me, because it's the history. You see all of these dominoes and they all fall perfectly. Just the perfect design going all the way back to when we first fell, that he set it up so that we could eventually be saved.
From the fall.
Yeah.
He started working on it.
Yeah. And it's just amazing to see that.
Well, that's what Peter was talking about in our last episode. That the vast swaths of time in which God's plan takes place.
Yeah, we can't
Our lives are too short to understand, to realize it, unless you look at history.
And we're lucky enough to have it.
Look at all the little things that took place to lead to the creation of this country.
Yeah. And it's not perfect.
No.
None of them are.
It's not perfect.
But it's helped a lot of people. And it helped further Christianity.
Yeah.
It gave them a safe haven.
Luther and Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn and all of these different people that did these different things that led to the eventual mass migration of Protestants from Europe to the United States.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I mean...
Or what, to the Americas.
The other thing that I like about when you look at history, and I'm a fan of that time period, of Reformation time period, and of figuring out the royal sideshow, pretty much, because it was kind of a sideshow at that point. It was so crazy during that time period. But Anne Boleyn basically doing the way that she was, so that she could get power and she could be queen, that's not a positive thing.
No.
Even the positive or the negative was turned into a positive for the long term.
Yeah.
Because she's the one that introduced Henry VIII to some of these writings, so that he could break with the church and create the Church of England, so that he could... I mean, it's more dominoes throughout history, and they're interesting to look at, and especially when you find where God used something that wasn't necessarily positive, wasn't necessarily a good situation, wouldn't have been a blessed situation, and he used it. He can use anything that can help further the kingdom of God. And that time period especially is just rich with dominoes.
Oh, yeah.
Between Luther and Tyndale and all of these different people, it just...
England's rivalry with Spain.
Yes. There's so many. There's just so many.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just so rich with it. I can't help it. I'm a history nerd, so I can't help it. But maybe we'll do a history episode one time.
We'll do that.
But
so we are at the wicket gate.
Yep, he made it through.
Made it through the gate.
Figured out his burden's not coming off yet.
Yep.
And that he has more to do.
Yep. That's where we're going to leave it for now.
Yeah, because there's way too much in this to do it in one episode.
Oh, yeah.
So we will leave Christian just on the inside of the wicket gate. And for those following the Graceless/Christian name change, this would be where his name changes, I believe, after he goes seeking and knocking and asks to be let in. I believe that's where his name change occurs in the few versions that I have found that in. So Graceless no more, Christian for sure. So we will be doing another episode on... I don't know if it'll take us just one more episode. It'll probably take at least 2 more episodes to get through this. At least.
Yeah.
So be on the lookout for those. We try to post once a week. I will definitely put links in the description for anybody that's interested in checking out Pilgrim's Progress, whether in print or on Audible. We use Audible a lot. I'll put links in the description.
Really good audiobook.
Yes.
It really is a good audiobook.
Both of them. We've listened to the more modern, shorter version, and then we've listened to the longer, Old English version as well. But some of these links will be affiliate links, and basically what that is if you happen to purchase any of these, then it just helps support the show with no cost to you, which is how we would kind of like to keep it. And maybe get a microphone so you don't hear every little creak and pin click, which I'm trying really hard to not do because I am a pin clicker. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoyed this first installment of our Pilgrim's Progress discussion, and please let us know what you thought about it. We have social media, Instagram and Facebook. I'll put links to those in the description. Come check us out there, see what we're up to. And I guess until next time, just keep wondering, Pilgrims.